There are certain nights when the human heart becomes very quiet, not because love has disappeared, but because it is waiting in silence, hoping not to be wrongly understood. And if these words somehow found you today, maybe a part of your soul is already tired from pretending you no longer care, while another part still secretly hopes someone somewhere is holding on to you just as strongly. Because the truth is, someone loves you more deeply than you realize. Not in the loud, dramatic way movies often show love, not through perfect timing or flawless words, but through hesitation, through emotional confusion, through distance that hides fear instead of lack of interest. And before you convince yourself to walk away forever, you need to understand something most people discover too late. Some hearts do not stop loving you when they become silent. Sometimes silence is simply the last defense of a soul terrified of losing what it cannot fully express. Human beings are strange when it comes to love, especially when love becomes real. We spend our entire lives believing we want deep emotional connection. Yet the moment someone truly touches the hidden parts of us, fear begins to awaken. Carl Jung once spoke about the unconscious mind like a hidden ocean beneath human behavior. And when someone genuinely loves you, they do not merely touch your surface personality. They accidentally awaken the abandoned pieces buried deep underneath it. Your insecurities, your unmet needs, your loneliness, your longing to finally be chosen without conditions. That kind of connection changes people. It shakes them internally. It exposes emotional wounds they spent years hiding from themselves. This is why someone can deeply love you and still pull away at the exact moment you need reassurance the most. It feels contradictory, but psychologically, it makes perfect sense. Love is not only warmth. Love is exposure. Love is vulnerability. Standing naked in front of another human being, hoping they will not use your tenderness against you. And many people were never taught how to survive emotional intimacy. They learned how to survive disappointment. They learned how to appear strong. They learned how to suppress emotions. But they never learned how to safely receive love without fear. So when this person became emotionally attached to you, something inside them began changing in ways they could not fully explain. Your presence started affecting their emotional state. Your silence suddenly mattered. Your attention became emotionally regulating. Your absence became heavier than they expected, and that terrified them. Because once someone gains the power to emotionally affect your inner world, your subconscious immediately recognizes risk. Suddenly losing them becomes possible. Suddenly abandonment feels imaginable again. Suddenly your carefully protected independence no longer feels safe. Many people confuse emotional distance with lack of love, but often emotional distance is actually evidence of emotional overwhelm. There are people who become cold because they do not care, and there are others who become distant because they care too much. The second type is much harder to understand because their behavior contradicts their emotions. Their heart moves toward you while their fear pulls them away. One part of them wants closeness. Another part whispers, "What if this ends the way everything else ended?" And without realizing it, they begin protecting themselves from pain that has not even happened yet. Maybe you have already felt this contradiction yourself. The strange inconsistency, the emotional warmth, followed by silence, the way they look at you when they think you are not paying attention, the way they remember small things about you without effort, the emotional tension that exists even in ordinary conversations, and yet something still feels blocked, something unfinished. It is almost as if their soul keeps leaning toward you while their mind keeps stepping backward. This is what unresolved emotional wounds often look like. People imagine trauma as dramatic destruction, but most emotional wounds are quieter than that. They hide inside attachment patterns, inside fear of vulnerability, inside emotional withdrawal. Some people disappear emotionally the moment they start caring deeply, because closeness unconsciously reminds them of pain they never healed from. Perhaps they once loved someone who abandoned them. Perhaps they learned as children that emotional expression led to rejection. Perhaps vulnerability once humiliated them so deeply that now their nervous system treats intimacy as danger. And the heartbreaking part is this: they may not even consciously understand why they are acting this way. The subconscious mind controls far more behavior than people realize. A person can genuinely love you while simultaneously sabotaging connection because internally, their nervous system associates love with emotional risk. They want closeness, but closeness activates fear. They crave intimacy, but intimacy awakens vulnerability. So they begin sending mixed signals without even understanding themselves. This is why emotionally mature love requires patience far more than passion. Passion is easy. Anyone can desire someone intensely for a moment. But true love asks something much harder from human beings. It asks them to remove emotional armor piece by piece. It asks them to trust again after disappointment. It asks them to remain emotionally open despite uncertainty. And for many people, that process feels terrifying because they have spent years building identities around emotional self-protection. You must also understand something important about silence. Silence is not always emptiness. Sometimes silence is emotional processing happening beneath the surface. Some people speak their emotions immediately. Others disappear inwardly when emotions become too strong. They retreat into thought, into confusion, into internal conflict. Especially people who have spent their lives suppressing vulnerability. Their silence is not always punishment. Sometimes it is emotional survival. But this creates painful misunderstandings in relationships. One person interprets silence as rejection, while the other experiences silence as protection. One feels abandoned, while the other feels emotionally overwhelmed. And slowly, two people who deeply care for each other begin drifting apart. Not because love disappeared, but because fear became louder than communication. This is where many people give up too early. They mistake emotional complexity for emotional absence. They assume love should always look obvious, consistent, and easy. But psychologically profound connections are rarely simple. They activate the deepest layers of human identity. They force people to confront their shadow selves, the insecure, wounded, frightened parts hidden beneath confidence and pride. Carl Jung believed that real love often becomes a mirror, not just a source of comfort, but a reflection of the unresolved self. And this is why certain connections feel spiritually intense. They force emotional awakening. They reveal patterns you never noticed before. They expose your fear of abandonment, your tendency to overgive, your fear of being unworthy, your desperate need for reassurance, your hidden loneliness. Suddenly, another human being unknowingly becomes connected to parts of your identity you did not realize were still wounded. This person may be experiencing the exact same internal chaos right now. They may lie awake at night replaying conversations with you while pretending during the day that everything is normal. They may fight the urge to message you because emotional pride keeps interfering. They may miss you deeply while convincing themselves distance is necessary. And perhaps the saddest part of human psychology is this. People often hurt the ones they love, most because those are the only people capable of truly hurting them back. That realization changes everything when you begin seeing people through a psychological lens instead of a purely emotional one, because suddenly you stop interpreting every confusing behavior as lack of love. You begin recognizing emotional defense mechanisms hidden beneath actions, the delayed replies, the emotional inconsistency, the moments of withdrawal after intimacy, the fear hidden inside emotional restraint. None of these behaviors are healthy when left unresolved, but they are deeply human. And maybe this is the painful truth your soul needed to hear today. Not every emotionally distant person is emotionally empty. Some are simply emotionally exhausted from surviving life with a guarded heart. There are people walking around carrying years of silent grief nobody ever noticed. People who learn to appear emotionally independent because depending on others once destroyed them. People who secretly crave tenderness but panic the moment they receive it consistently. People who have forgotten how to trust calm love because chaos became familiar to them. If this person truly loves you, their internal battle may be much deeper than you can currently see. But there is another side to this truth that you must not ignore. Love alone is not enough without emotional growth. You cannot save someone from their own unconscious patterns if they refuse to confront themselves. You cannot endlessly sacrifice your emotional well-being, hoping your love will heal another person's fear. Real connection requires mutual emotional responsibility. Compassion matters, yes, but so does self-respect. Understanding someone's wounds should never require abandoning your own emotional needs entirely. This is where emotional maturity becomes essential. Emotionally mature love does not beg for crumbs. It does not destroy itself trying to prove worthiness. It does not chase endlessly while neglecting dignity. Mature love understands patience without self-abandonment. It creates space without disappearing emotionally. It allows compassion without losing boundaries. And sometimes the greatest act of love is not forcing connection, but allowing someone the emotional space to confront themselves honestly, because transformation cannot be controlled from the outside. A person changes only when their soul becomes tired of repeating the same emotional cycles. Perhaps this connection entered your life not only to give you love, but to awaken you. Psychologically, to teach you the difference between attachment and genuine emotional alignment, to show you how deeply you crave emotional reciprocity, to force you to confront the ways you have ignored your own intuition out of fear of losing someone. Think carefully about this. Have there been moments when your intuition quietly whispered the truth long before your mind accepted it? Moments where you sensed their feelings beneath their words? Human beings are far more intuitive than they realize. The subconscious constantly perceives emotional energy, body language, emotional shifts, silence patterns, eye contact, and nervous tension. Long before logic catches up, the soul often already knows. That is why certain people remain emotionally unforgettable, not because they were perfect, but because they emotionally awakened something sleeping inside you. And awakening is rarely comfortable. Sometimes awakening arrives through longing, through confusion, through emotional distance that forces inner reflection, through missing someone so deeply that you finally confront the loneliness you were hiding from. Pain has a strange psychological function. It strips illusions. It exposes emotional truth. It reveals where healing is still needed. This is why some relationships completely transform your inner world even when they never become fully stable externally. They force growth, they force awareness, they force emotional evolution. And perhaps this person is currently standing at the edge of that transformation themselves. Maybe they are slowly realizing that emotional avoidance no longer protects them the way it then once did. Maybe your absence has forced them to confront feelings they tried suppressing. Maybe they are beginning to understand that real love cannot survive forever inside silence and pride. Because eventually, every human being reaches a moment where loneliness becomes heavier than pride, vulnerability. And when that moment arrives, people begin changing. Not instantly, not perfectly, but gradually. They begin recognizing the emotional walls they built around themselves. They start noticing how often fear controlled their decisions. They realize how many opportunities for genuine connection they sabotaged trying to protect themselves from pain. And for the first time, they begin understanding that emotional safety cannot exist without emotional openness. This realization is life-changing. But while they navigate their own awakening, you must continue navigating yours. Do not allow uncertainty to destroy your sense of self-worth. Do not let another person's emotional confusion convince you that you are difficult to love. The way someone responds to intimacy often reflects their relationship with themselves, far more than your value as a human being. Many emotionally unavailable people are not withholding love because you are unworthy. They are withholding because they themselves are terrified. Terrified of needing someone. Terrified of needing someone. Dependency. Terrified of rejection. Terrified of losing control. Terrified of being emotionally seen too clearly. And ironically, the more deeply they love, the more vulnerable they feel. This creates internal contradiction. They crave closeness while resisting it simultaneously. And unless they consciously heal, they remain trapped between desire and fear. But you cannot carry the emotional burden for both souls. You can love someone deeply and still choose emotional balance. You can understand someone psychologically without excusing endless emotional inconsistency. Compassion should never become self-destruction. This is one of the most important lessons emotionally awakened people eventually learn. Love should expand your spirit, not slowly erase it. And yet, despite all this complexity, there are still connections worth fighting for. Rare connections, where two souls gradually learn each other's fears with tenderness instead of judgment. Connections where emotional walls slowly soften over time. Connections where both people choose healing instead of ego. These relationships do exist, but they require honesty, accountability, vulnerability, patience, and emotional courage. Most importantly, they require two people willing to stop running from themselves, because every relationship eventually becomes a confrontation with the self. You cannot truly love another person while remaining completely disconnected from your own true emotional truth. That is why shadow work matters. Shadow work is not simply spiritual language. Psychologically, it means facing the hidden parts of yourself honestly. The jealousy you deny, the fear you hide, the loneliness you distract yourself from, the emotional patterns you repeat unconsciously, the wounds you pretend no longer affect you. Until people confront these hidden layers, relationships continue repeating the same pain in different forms. Perhaps this person is finally beginning to face their shadow because of you. Perhaps your love became too real to ignore, too emotionally honest, too psychologically awakening. And even if they have not fully figured themselves out yet, something inside them knows your connection matters. Human beings do not emotionally struggle this deeply over people who mean nothing to them. Real emotional conflict only exists where genuine attachment exists. That is why indifference feels cold and simple, while love feels complicated and emotionally alive. If someone truly does not care, their energy becomes emotionally flat. But when someone deeply loves you while battling inner fear, their energy becomes inconsistent, emotionally charged, confusing, intense. You feel their internal conflict, even when words are absent. You have probably already sensed this. The emotional pull, the unfinished feeling, the strange intuitive knowing that beneath all the silence, something real still exists. And maybe you have questioned yourself repeatedly because of it. Maybe part of you keeps wondering if you are imagining things. But deep emotional intuition rarely appears without reason. The human subconscious constantly perceives emotional truths hidden beneath surface behavior. Still, intuition must be balanced with wisdom. Do not romanticize emotional suffering endlessly. Do not become addicted to emotional uncertainty simply because intensity feels meaningful. Some people stay trapped in painful dynamics because emotional unpredictability creates psychological addiction. The nervous system becomes attached to emotional highs and lows. Calm love can initially feel unfamiliar or even boring after chaotic attachment. This is why healing changes attraction. Emotionally healed people no longer chase emotional confusion to feel alive. They begin valuing consistency, emotional safety, honesty, and peace. They stop interpreting emotional unavailability as depth. They stop trying to earn love through suffering. And perhaps this entire experience is slowly guiding you toward that realization too. Because sometimes the universe does not send someone into your life merely to complete you. Sometimes it sends them to transform you, to awaken your standards, to strengthen your emotional awareness, to teach you that your heart deserves reciprocity, not emotional guessing games forever. At the same time, transformation takes time for everyone involved. If this person truly loves you, they may currently be fighting battles inside themselves nobody else can see. Battles between old wounds and new hope, between fear and desire, between self-protection and emotional surrender. And maybe right now, they are standing alone somewhere, replaying your voice in their mind, wondering whether it is too late to reach for you honestly. The human heart carries regret more heavily than rejection. Many people would rather avoid vulnerability temporarily than risk losing someone forever, until one day they realize silence itself became the reason they lost them. Do not underestimate how deeply people can feel emotions they struggle expressing outwardly. Some of the deepest love stories are hidden beneath restrained behavior, not because restraint is ideal, but because human beings are emotionally imperfect creatures, trying to survive their own histories while longing to be loved fully anyway. That is what makes love both beautiful and tragic. Two wounded souls trying to trust each other while carrying invisible emotional scars. Two nervous systems shaped by different pain. Two inner children silently asking the same question, will you still stay if you truly see me? And maybe that question is at the center of this connection too. Because beneath pride, beneath silence, beneath fear, beneath emotional confusion, there is often simply a human being terrified of not being enough for the person they love. People rarely admit this openly, but many emotionally distant individuals secretly believe they will eventually disappoint the people they care about. So they create emotional distance before abandonment can happen naturally. It is subconscious self-protection. If I stay emotionally guarded, losing them will hurt less. But love does not work that way. Guarded love still hurts. Silent love still aches. Suppressed emotions still leave scars. And eventually the soul grows exhausted, carrying feelings that were never expressed honestly. This is why emotional truth matters. Not performative emotion, not manipulation, not emotional dependency disguised as romance, real truth. The kind that says, I am afraid, but I care. I struggle emotionally, but you matter to me. I do not fully understand myself yet, but losing you feels unbearable. Those are the kinds of emotionally honest moments that change relationships forever. And if this person reaches that emotional threshold, everything between you could transform. But until then, your task is not to lose yourself inside waiting. Continue healing, continue growing, continue becoming emotionally whole, regardless of outcome. Because your worth does not decrease simply because another person is struggling internally. You are not difficult to love. You are not too much. You are not emotionally unrealistic for desiring clarity, consistency, and emotional presence. Never let emotionally wounded people convince you that your needs are excessive simply because they are uncomfortable confronting intimacy. Healthy love may not always be perfect, but it should feel emotionally safe enough to breathe inside. And one day, whether with this person or another soul aligned with your emotional depth, you will experience a connection that no longer requires constant decoding. A connection where affection is not hidden behind fear forever. A connection where emotional honesty replaces silence. A connection where two people stop pretending they are unaffected by each other. But perhaps before that future arrives, this current connection still has something important left to teach both of you. Maybe reconciliation, maybe closure, maybe awakening, maybe courage. Only time reveals which. Still, do not ignore the quiet truth your soul may already recognize. Somebody out there truly loves you. Not superficially, not temporarily, not casually, deeply, inwardly, emotionally, perhaps imperfectly, but genuinely. And before you give up completely, understand that human beings sometimes need time to become emotionally capable of the love they already feel internally. Healing is rarely immediate. Emotional awakening rarely arrives cleanly. People often become emotionally mature only after nearly losing what mattered most to them. That is the tragedy of human growth, but also its beauty. Because sometimes, right when hope seems exhausted, people finally become honest with themselves. And maybe, just maybe, this story is not ending the way your fears keep imagining. Maybe this silence is not the death of love. Maybe it is the painful transformation before emotional truth finally emerges. So tonight, before you convince yourself you were never loved, remember this. Not every emotionally distant person has forgotten you. Some are simply fighting invisible wars between love and fear. And if your heart still feels connected to theirs in a way logic cannot fully explain, perhaps there is a reason for that feeling. Perhaps beneath all the confusion, two souls are still trying to find the courage to meet each other honestly. Until then, protect your peace, but do not harden your heart. Remain emotionally wise without becoming emotionally cold. Because the people who continue believing in love after disappointment are often the ones who eventually experience it most deeply. And maybe one day you will look back at this painful chapter, not as the moment love disappeared, but as the moment two wounded hearts slowly learned how to stop running from it. If these words reached something deep inside you tonight, hold on to that feeling. Somewhere within your soul, you already know which connections are real